take a look at our top stories. China's foreign ministry has reacted to a US federal court's decision to block President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, stating that trade wars have no winners. The Trump administration have appealed against the court ruling. The Kremlin says that Ukraine is yet to respond to a proposal for another round of direct talks on the 2nd of June in Istanbul. Turkish President Erdogan says Russia's talk proposal should not be taken lightly, as Russian strikes in Ukraine's Sumy region reportedly killed 2 people. Israeli strikes in Gaza have killed dozens of people today, including 23 at a refugee camp in Al-Bureij, according to Gaza's civil defence. This comes as 4 people died at a UN aid warehouse amid a worsening humanitarian situation in the enclave. Meanwhile, Israel has announced a major expansion in the occupied West Bank, with ministers saying 22 settlements have been approved. This will be the biggest expansion in decades. While settlements are widely seen as illegal under international law, Israel disputes it. China has slammed the United States' decision to revoke the visas of certain Chinese students as unreasonable and ideologically motivated. This comes after Donald Trump said foreign students should be capped at 15% amid an ongoing dispute with Harvard University. Billionaire Elon Musk has stepped down from his role as a special government employee after spearheading sweeping federal cuts with his Department of Government Efficiency. Musk thanked Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending, insisting Doge will continue. French President Emmanuel Macron has left Indonesia to head for Singapore on the final leg of his Southeast Asia tour. The president, who also visited former French colony Vietnam, is to deliver a keynote address at Asia's leading defence summit, the Shangri-La Dialogue. Sudan's health ministry says a deadly cholera outbreak has claimed at least 70 lives in just 2 days in the capital Khartoum. The city struggles to contain the spread amid ongoing conflict and a collapsing health service. Starting this hour, a US trade court has blocked most of President Donald Trump's tariffs, ruling that he overstepped his authority by imposing broad tariffs on imports from trading partners without congressional approval. China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning and Commerce Ministry spokeswoman He Yongqiang both commented on the broader issue of tariffs. Here is what they had to say.
在关税问题上，中方已经多次阐明了立场。关税战、贸易战没有赢家，搞保护主义损害各方的利益。
中方敦促美方正视国际社会和国内各方理性声音，彻底取消单边加征关税的错误做法。
Well, these reactions come as the Court of International Trade ruled that only Congress can regulate international commerce, rejecting the use of emergency powers for tariffs. A 3-judge panel said it wasn't ruling on policy wisdom, but found Trump's tariffs illegal, imposing a permanent ban on broad orders since January. The decision was met with positive reactions in the financial markets, with the US dollar rising against currencies such as the euro, yen and Swiss franc, while Wall Street futures and Asian equities also climbed. The court ordered the Trump administration to revoke the affected tariff orders within 10 days. The administration promptly filed an appeal and challenged the court's authority. The court struck down all tariffs since January under the IEEPA, a law for national emergencies, but left industry-specific tariffs like those on steel, aluminium and autos in place. Analysts say it's a setback for the administration, but unlikely to affect key US trade partners. US White House spokesperson defended the tariffs, calling the trade deficit a national emergency and slamming the court for meddling in policy. The lawsuit, filed by small businesses in 12 states, claimed the tariffs hurt their operations. Trump is the first US president to use IEEPA for tariffs, a law usually reserved for sanctions on foreign adversaries. Well, lots of updates there, and joining us to discuss them in this ongoing trade tension and, of course, court action is Gerard Al-Fil, a finance expert who is joining us from Dubai. Gerard, thank you ever so much for joining us. Let's just get your first reaction on this court ruling that, if it is followed through and no appeal is successful, would see a failure for Trump in terms of his tariff policy. Do you agree?
It's a setback, definitely. I take several things out of this court ruling. First of all, the checks and balances work in the United States. So there's not only a setback for the Trump administration, but also for those media and those critics who say Trump is now ruling like a monarch, and because he has a trifecta, so that means the government, the majority in the Senate and the majority in the House, that he can do whatever he wants. No, checks and balances work in the United States. The judicial systems are in place. The judicial systems work. First. Second is going back to your point on the positive market reactions. Yes, they were positive, and the greenback has gained some ground, regained some ground. However, it's not that there's a reverse rally. Yes, the US dollar has gained against the euro, against the Swiss franc, against the Japanese yen. However, it's not the total reaction that people are now euphoric, and also some analysts already say it, like from Goldman Sachs or from UBS earlier today, that it's too soon to relax, because there are still ways to keep tariffs in place, some tariffs in place, and the judicial tug of war is not over yet.
Yes, Gerard, we've had a response from China, and we expect further responses from many of these nations which have been impacted by Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. Given that there are ongoing trade discussions with these tariffs in the back, of course, how will this impact those discussions that are currently going on with the US administration?
They will carry on, and also the efforts will continue, that those states, those countries which are affected by the tariffs, China in particular, will continue to strengthen their ties with other countries. I'll give an example. 2 weeks ago, President Trump was in the Gulf region here, visiting Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. At the same time, the Chinese government reached out to Latin America. So they used the time, of course, then to reach out to the turf of the Americas. And also earlier this week, there was a conference of the ASEAN ministers plus the Gulf Arab ministers in Southeast Asia. And these efforts, you will see, will continue, that everyone tries to strengthen ties with parties they where ties are and trade ties are still in place, but they want to expand them. So the sky is the limit in this case. The People's Daily in China reported earlier today that after the 90-day pause was implemented earlier this month, that the shipping capacities are now back to a maximum capacity between the US and China. That means there is an appetite, there's a hunger for trade between both countries, and this also the Trump administration has to take into account. It's interesting that you mentioned also Elon Musk has resigned, will pull out of the administration. So this is a bit of a double whammy for the Trump administration, isn't it? The court ruling that the tariffs are not covered by US law, and also that Elon Musk pulls out. So we have to see.
Absolutely, Gerard. Of course, this situation is going to be escalated. The Trump administration, White House have said that they will appeal this. But if it is stuck at this point from the court ruling, what will the impact be on businesses?
There will remain there's an uncertainty, and the uncertainty will remain for businesses. They will look for alternative parties, like, for example, other regions like Latin America, like Middle East, Africa, Europe, Central Asia. And I think businesses will now lobby even more in the Trump administration, or with the Trump administration, to think over these things. And because this pattern shows a typical Trump style pattern, try to reach the maximum what you want, and then you pull back. Either the lobbyists stop you or the courts stop you, but if you fall short, you still have to reached something. That's a typical businessman style, the art of the deal, if you would like to say.
Yes, and Gerard, to bring an end to this discussion, you speak about the art of the deal there, but given the instability that has been caused across global markets, if the US isn't going to gain more money through these tariffs, is this a bust for Trump?
Say it again, more money from the tariffs?
So if this ruling stands and the tariffs aren't in place and there won't be reciprocal tariffs which were set to make the United States, of course, a huge amount of income, is this a bust for Trump?
In a way, yes, because also tariffs are taxes. If a Chinese exporter wants to sell goods to the US and then there's a tariff on, he will transfer these tariffs, will put a premium on the price of his goods, and the consumer in the US has to pay. Now, if they are deleted, definitely this is a bust, because in other places the Trump administration wants to increase spending, like in security, like in military, like in stopping immigration, and you can say so, yes, definitely, it's a setback.
Gerard Alfil, thank you ever so much for providing that insight there. We will, of course, be across all of the developments as this appeal process goes through, and, of course, the ramifications on the global economy. But we move on now to the Middle East. In the latest development, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have killed at least 44 people today, according to the territory's civil defence agency. Among the dead were 23 individuals from a single family home in Al-Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza. Civil defence official Mohammed Al-Mughayir reported multiple injuries and several missing following the attack, which targeted the Kareni family residence. 4 people died when a vehicle was targeted in Gaza City, while 8 others were killed in a strike on a residential home in Jabalia. In a separate incident, Gazan officials confirmed that 4 people lost their lives when a United Nations food warehouse was stormed. The World Food Programme has raised the alarm, calling for immediate aid to prevent a deepening humanitarian crisis and starvation across the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has announced the establishment of 22 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, a decision widely condemned under international law and by human rights organisations. On the diplomatic front, European countries including Ireland, Norway, Spain and Slovenia have issued a joint statement. They reaffirmed their support for the implementation of a two-state solution, urging both sides to return to dialogue and peaceful negotiations. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Martin Sa-Arrayas, an international affairs expert who's joining us from Quito in Ecuador. Martin, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us. Further strikes reported in the Gaza Strip today. This, of course, amid an ongoing humanitarian crisis, with humanitarian organisations saying that potentially millions face famine, potential starvation as well. Why do you think that the international support is starting to move towards a potential two-state solution? Is it because of the humanitarian crisis?
I think the international community is moving towards supporting a two-state solution because a lot of mistakes the Israeli government has been doing, unfortunately. I think, obviously, one of the prime initiatives of this government has been the future security of the state of Israel, which is completely fine and is completely legitimate. However, I think other policies, like having ministers like Bezalel Smotrich and having a lot of very extremist far-right elements in this government who are actually taking a move to increase the settlements in a very bad point in time. I mean, we are dealing with a war. We have multiple hostages in Gaza, and that should be our goal right now, not increasing settlements. And I think this is a wrong move, and I think what the Israeli government should be focusing right now should be in taking back the hostages and to end this war. Unfortunately, this is not very easy when you are dealing with a terror organization which is using civilians or human shields. And also, we need to remember the Hamas terror organization. They are taking all of the humanitarian supports. They're taking all of the international money to build terror infrastructure and to arm this terror organization, which is very, I mean, of course, everyone is absolutely sad about these civilians being killed. But on the other hand, if you bring humanitarian aids, this is gonna go ending in Hamas' hands. So it's a very difficult situation.
Yes, Martin, we've just played a graphic on screen showing two locations where there has been chaotic scenes at UN aid facilities. Of course, the situation is worsening and the situation on the ground is a difficult one with desperation amongst some people looking for food. What more do you think can be done to avoid this situation where deaths are being reported? Is it just a case of more aid or should there be more done from the Israeli side?
I think this should be coordinated between the United Nations, international community, and the Israeli government, the IDF, because I think, unfortunately, the UN has been very naive in, believing that this food and these aids will go to the right people. I mean, the Hamas organization has been using UN organizations as useful idiots. Sorry for the word, but it's true. All of the monetary support, all of the support in general has been going to Hamas' hands, and the people of Gaza have been starving, while all of this money have been going to the leaders of Hamas, even abroad in other Arab countries which are supporting Hamas. So I think if the whole world is going to support civilians in Gaza, they should do it in a very strategic way with the help of the IDF, being sure this actually goes to the people in Gaza, not to this terror organization. Because instead of helping the people of Gaza, the international community unwillingly have been supporting Hamas by giving them all of these monetary aids. So this is a very complicated situation. It should be taken very seriously and with a very responsible way.
Yes, Martin, of course, amid the humanitarian crises being reported within the Gaza Strip, there are still over 50 hostages dead and alive being held by Hamas. And we've had overnight an announcement from US envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, that there is a new ceasefire proposal. How important is it that this effort towards peace continues amid the uncertainty on the ground and continued military operation from Israel?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't see this war ending in the near future because of two situations. First of all, Hamas is still alive, and you can never talk with Hamas. They will never accept any ceasefire because they're completely willing to destroy the Jewish people in general. This is a terror criminal organization. And on the other hand, the Israeli government, you have a lot of elements like Bezalel Smotrich or Ben Gvir, who they are not interested at all in ending this war. They want to use this war for their own interest, and they don't care about the hostages. So I think we have two extreme elements, and this is going to be very difficult to keep a solution when you have two completely. Of course, you can never compare a terror organization with extreme right-wing government. At the end of the day, Israel has a completely legit government. We're talking about a moral army, even though the whole world is criticizing the IDF. The IDF is still one of the most advanced and most moral armies in the world, and you can never compare that with a terror organization. But again, I mean, when you have these elements in the government that they're not willing to accept anything for a ceasefire, and you have a terror organization in Gaza, it's going to be almost impossible to reach an agreement. So this is very complicated, and I don't think the war is going to be ending in a near future.
Yes, absolutely, Martin. Well put. Of course, it is an extremely difficult situation. I want to end our discussion on something that was briefly mentioned earlier, and this is the expansion in the West Bank. 22 Jewish settlements have been approved, according to an Israeli minister. This is seen widely as illegal under international law, which Israel refutes. Given the ongoing complications in Gaza that we've just spoken about, is this the right move from the Israeli government right now?
I think right now the right move should be to take the hostages back. I can understand the Israeli government because actually Jewish settlements and the the IDF being in the West Bank can guarantee security for Israel. I can understand it, but I think right now the move should be taking the hostages back, and to also for Israel interests, economical interests, diplomatic interests. It's not good for Israel to become a country that is going to be losing a lot of allies, strong allies. Even Britain is going to criticize Israel. So I think Israel should be focused right now in not losing international allies, international support, to keep being as it has been always, being a democratic state in the Middle East. And I think these moves should not be implemented right now. Right now, I think the war and giving Israel right now the hostages back, security is the most important thing. And regarding the legality of these settlements is pretty controversial because in a lot of the West Bank territories, you have the territories A, B, and C, which is divided by Palestinian, Israeli, and mixed territories according to the Oslo agreements. So it is not really accurate to say they are completely illegal. I just think right now is not the right time to start talking about settlements in the West Bank. We should be focusing in the hostages and ending this war.
Martin Sa-Arayes, thank you as always for providing such insight there. We will, of course, be following all of the developments across the whole of the Middle East. We move on now to North America, and in a sharp escalation, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced that the United States will begin aggressively revoking visas of some Chinese students, particularly those with ties to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in strategic fields. The Trump administration says the move is aimed at safeguarding national security, but it could have major repercussions, disrupting one of the largest international student groups in the US and potentially hurting both American universities as well as companies. Rubio said the State Department will also tighten visa rules for future applicants from China and Hong Kong, working in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security. In response, China's foreign ministry slammed the move as unjustified and ideologically driven, claiming it violates students' legitimate rights and harms cultural exchanges. Beijing has lodged a formal diplomatic protest with Washington. Let's listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry has had to say.
以意识形态和国家安全为借口，无理取消中国留学生签证，严重损害中国留学生的合法权益，干扰两国正常人文交流。中方对此坚决反对，已向美方提出交涉。
Well, joining us to discuss these developments and reaction from China is Andrew K.P. Leung, a China strategist who's joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you for joining us. Let's look at this response from China after the action that Marco Rubio announced. What do you think the response will be, not just now, but in the longer term, given the potential ramifications of the revokement of these visas?
What we're seeing now with this restrictions of these visas is the latest episode of a self-inflicted destruction of Americans' leadership of the so-called liberal world order. The first pillar of this order is free trade, and that has been almost totally destroyed by the tariffs war against not only Americans' adversaries, but its allies all over the world. And of course, the liberal world order is also based on Americans' long-held openness to immigration. Again, that has been totally upended. And then, of course, the kind of rule-based order respecting other people's sovereignty, that again has been totally discarded and thrown into the dustbin with Trump's claim to occupy Greenland and to make Canada the 51st state, control over the Panama Canal, and rename the Gulf of Mexico into Gulf of America. So that is again this trashing Americans' credibility as the leader of his the world liberal order, which has of course benefited the United States hugely, but also the rest of the world. Now, this last episode is again what underpins the Americans' leadership, which is academic freedom. Witness is aggression against Harvard and a lot of Ivy League institutions, and now it's restrictions on student visas, targeting the best and the brightest from China, and in particular, in the sense that, of course, China as now accounts for something like 25% of foreign students, especially in the Americans' Ivy League universities. And then, as far as the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM research, postdoctorate research, postdoctorate students from China account for a much higher percentage, even as much as 40% at some point. So these restrictions, treating every China student as a potential spy, restricting visas, drastically reduce the intake of even foreign students, not just China, because Trump has also said that foreign students, as far as the Harvard University is concerned, should not be something like 30% as of now. It should be reduced to, at best, 15%. So this openness to foreign academics, students, researchers, again, is a self-inflicted destruction of another pillar of the American-led liberal order, which in this case, academic freedom.
Yes, Andrew, we don't have too long left, but of course a big topic in this discussion is Harvard and the ongoing dispute that has been happening with Trump and his administration and the Ivy League University. Of course, comments around Harvard's relationship with China. How significant is Chinese interaction with Ivy League schools, and how damaging could this be, not just to young Chinese students who are looking to learn more, but also potentially the US business and economy moving forward?
Well, as highlighted by ex-Harvard president and ex-US Secretary for the Treasury, Larry Summers, Harvard is standing its ground because it's got a large amount of private endowment. But even Harvard cannot possibly withstand the full-blown Trump crackdown on the university. It is of course, very sad because Harvard is held in high regard, not only in academia in the United States, but across the world. It has a long history of openness and upholding a lot of values which underpin the American leadership of the post-war order in particular. And of course, Harvard existed long before the Second World War, and it's a very, very long history. And as I said, the best and the brightest from China, from Hong Kong, always look upon Harvard. I myself am a Harvard alumni, so I'm very, very sad about this destruction and attack against Harvard. But I think that this, coming back to my early remarks, this again is a last pillar of American-led liberal order, which is now being destroyed with self-inflicted kind of tactics in the hope of driving everything American first, without realizing what makes American first is not just numbers, it's not just money, but American soft power. And American soft power is not lying in tatters, and its allies are recalibrating relationships. Not that they would embrace China entirely, but they're going to think more than twice of relying on the United States, which just seem to be much less reliable, even as a partner, let alone a recognized leader of the so-called liberal world order. So I think the whole world has been upended.
Yes.
And this is the last episode.
Andrew KP Leung, as always, thank you ever so much for providing your insight. That is all that we have time for, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest breaking international news.